Good afternoon, and welcome to what may be the first of two emergency sessions of the Mary Trump Show today on Tuesday, December 6th. I'm here with Jen Taub to walk you guys through literally breaking within the last half an hour news that something actually two things happened today. One much less newsworthy. First of all, I submitted my appeal in my case to the appeals court in New York, but that doesn't, you know, that doesn't tell us much of anything about what's going on legally for Donald Trump. Can you perhaps fill us in on the very, very big breaking news and help us unravel it?
And by you, would that be me, Mary?
Well, I don't think it's the guy in between us.
Well, the guy in between us would say, it's a witch hunt or something like that.
I think he's too busy breaking things to say much of anything.
Wait, I hear ketchup.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Yeah, so this is fantastic news, both for this particular jury verdict and what confidence this jury verdict will give to prosecutors going forward. What happened today is a jury deliberated for just a day and a half in a tax fraud case under New York law in what's called the New York Supreme Court, which is the New York trial court. It's a case brought by Alvin Bragg, for which the case was first brought July of 2021. And the parties indicted at the time were Alan Weisselberg, the former CFO of the various Trump Organization businesses, and also two corporations that do business as a Trump organization. One's like the Trump Payroll Corporation, and I think one is called the Trump Corporation. And what happened today is a jury found these two businesses operated by your uncle, owned by him, and sometimes through some weird trusts that weren't really blind trusts after he was president. A jury of his peers, of the corporation's peers, found these businesses guilty on 17 criminal counts.
17. Guys,
All of them.
We've been talking a lot about Sesame Street because sadly Bob died yesterday, but at the ripe old age of 90. So I've been thinking a lot about Sesame Street and the count. I wish the count were here to help us count all the way to 17. So let's dive in to what some of those charges were and now verdicts against the company were. Like, specifically, what is the corporation, has the corporation been found guilty of? But more importantly, in some ways, what are the implications of that? And when I first glanced at it, because I was trying to cook cauliflower when all this
I'm
was
so
going
proud
down.
of you. You're cooking
you.
cauliflower. It sounds so
Well,
healthy.
not anymore. I had to turn the oven off. But anyway,
were you like roasting it with some olive oil and
yes,
garlic?
something
Oh, sorry,
like
not
that.
important. Not important.
Not really important. but anyway, so I was in deciding whether to get on with you. I was looking through the article quickly, and the one thing, yes, happy 17 counts, guilty. However, just hearing the prosecutors had not charged Donald. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what happens. Everybody around him gets indicted, gets charged, goes to prison, what have you. But you said something just now that made me feel a little better. How much confidence, as one of the implications of this excellent result, how much confidence might this give the very newly appointed guy whose name I don't remember? So if you could sort of fold that into the question about what the charges were and what it means.
Okay. Yeah. So there is several parts of this, and I'm going to kind of start at the beginning. One thing that you said is, Donald wasn't charged. When I wrote about this case in early July of 2021 for Washington Monthly, I wrote a piece called How to Understand the Trump Tax Indictment. And in that piece, I talked about this, the indictment that was against, Alan Weisselberg, as well as the Trump Corporation, Trump Payroll Corporation. And I did make clear, and it's obvious from the indictment itself, that while Donald himself was not charged, there were things in the indictment that kind of hinted that he was involved. And one of the hints was that as part of there was this conspiracy charges that were talked about, and in the conspiracy between Weisselberg and the Trump businesses, they mention that Donald was involved in that. He entered into a lease in March of 2005 for an apartment in Manhattan in the Trump Place building. And that was for, it had a rider in this lease. And that was to permit Alan Weisselberg and his wife to occupy the apartment and to use it as their primary residence. And this is part of the charges. And he was acting on behalf of the business. And throughout the case, although I did not watch the jury trial, I've seen reporting and seen it discussed throughout the case. Even if Weisselberg would not point the finger at Donald himself, he was brought up again and again, including in closing arguments, and the judge did not stop that from happening. So to answer the question, the question here is now, would the Manhattan DA now additionally charge Donald for this? What I expect is that charges will come not just under this by the Manhattan DA, but also related to the civil case, the case that Tish James was willing to bring about the overvaluation and manipulation of asset values for purposes of tax evasion and bank fraud and insurance fraud and tax fraud. She brought that civil case in September. She mentioned, yes, these are also crimes under state law. She mentioned and made a referral to the Southern District of New York for the federal crimes. And as you said, just yesterday, or was it 2 days ago, Alvin Bragg mentioned, the guy who won the case today, mentioned that the news mentioned that he had a new guy
I think it was
on board yesterday. So this new guy on board, this is a shot in the arm for everybody, because if this case were lost, if you could not win this case, it would put a damper on anything else. So not only does this give the prosecutors confidence, it gives them confidence that a jury isn't afraid to hold the president accountable, albeit through his eponymous businesses. This is huge psychologically, I believe.
Yeah. And now, before you get to the rest of my multi-part question, because as we discussed earlier, this is
how we do it.
Yes,
the multi-part.
Yeah,
Dahlia, it's how we do it. Don't criticize.
It just is, and she
does too.
She's not here to stop us. So,
that's right.
So I just want to go back and if you already answered this, forgive me, but I'm my head's spinning a little bit. What was the rationale, if one was even given, for not charging Donald directly? Because now I know this isn't evidence, but at least anecdotally, and I'm pretty sure you can prove it, everybody knows that nothing happens in the Trump organization. And just to clarify and to define the terms for everybody, the Trump organization is not a Fortune 500 company. It is a very, very, very small, like mom and pop real estate firm that was started by my grandfather in the 40s or 50s. And so it is beyond reason to think that there was any kind of tax scheme or fraud going on, widespread fraud in the company, without his either orchestrating it or knowing about it. So they're stopping short of indicting him and landing on Weisselberg was a little disappointing at the time.
My thinking, of course, I wasn't in the room and don't have evidence of this. No. My thinking is that they knew they had Weisselberg dead to rights. And I think the hope had been in summer of 2021 that he would have cooperated more and given real evidence about Donald's knowledge, not just of this, which I hadn't described, to remind folks, this under the table, off the books compensation scheme that amounts to tax and also business records fraud. I think they expected him to flip, to cooperate in such a way to implicate, again, Donald here, as well as in the much larger tax and bank fraud and insurance fraud case involving those, large properties, right? So when I think they did not, this is back in, 2021, right after he's left office. And I think there wasn't a lot of confidence to indict a former president on this kind of case when they didn't necessarily have direct evidence, when they're hoping to do better. So that's what my thinking was. And I think this was a smart move. I mean, from the start, I did think that, if you could get a jury to convict a former president's business organizations that are so identified with him, that it won't be so hard to take that next step. I think it feels very momentous to do that for a jury. It's the beyond a reasonable doubt's a pretty high standard. So now I think a lot of law enforcement can move forward. As people have asked, what about the fact that this involved federal tax evasion? Are they going to, it just kind of mushrooms out from here. And this is absolutely the worst legal jeopardy your uncle's businesses have ever been in. There have been so many civil cases. The largest dollar amount, I think, was the $25 million settlement involving the fake university, but that was civil RICO. This is huge. This is the first time the businesses were criminally charged.
Okay,
and a victory, right? Not acquittal. And this will stand up on
and
appeal.
Not a settlement,
right? This will stand up on appeal.
Okay, so now that you've filled us all with joy, which doesn't happen.
My joy spilleth over.
Yeah,
there's so much joy.
Because let's be real. There, we make progress in one thing, and then we get knocked back. Whether it's pick your case, right? And even on cases that are proceeding, we know we can still get knocked back. This is definitive. This is a verdict, and yes, it can be appealed. But as we've been saying for a very long time, come at the king, you best not miss. Or the guy who is pretending to be a king and is really just a court jester. But either way, and they didn't miss, and which again potentially explains some of the reticence to deal with him directly. But let's talk about the charges, if you have a list of those in front of you, and what is the what happens next in terms of sentencing or in terms of fines?
Well, the only person who is going to jail is Alan Weisselberg. And his sentence, if I remember it correctly, he was promised, I think, a sentence of 5 months in jail in Rikers, and then 5.
Sorry, go ahead.
What? I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, just because I didn't let you finish. I'm like 5 months for ripping people off for decades. But anyway, please continue. 5 months at Rikers?
My understanding.
Wow, rich white guys don't go to Rikers.
Well, I don't understand. I think that my understanding, from what I'm reading, from what I had read, because I'm going back to see what his sentence was. And I think it was 5 months. Let me just confirm that. But no one else at this point is a human being, what we would call a natural person. So my understanding is that the court promised Weisselberg to serve 7 months in jail if he would testify in the upcoming trial about this 15-year scheme to defraud New York State, New York City, and evade taxes. So it was on this under the table payments. I mean, there's no one else who will, when a corporation is found guilty itself, when not just a corporation, but when any enterprise is found guilty, there isn't a person that automatically is given as tribute, to serve the sentence. So what it would mean for the business would be paying some kind of fine, but the implications in terms of being able to borrow are probably going to be tremendous. The ability to dissolve the business might be there. As we know, the separate track related to the much larger alleged tax evasion, bank fraud, and business records evasion that Tish James is pursuing civilly can come with the ability. Well, she would, in addition to that case she's bringing, she's going to be looking at this verdict that Alvin Bragg just brought in as a piece to bring to a piece of evidence to bring into a court, probably to ask for the dissolution of those business, but it's not yet. But after, they're already, I think she's freezing their ability to move assets. I mean, this is not a good day for any of his businesses or any of the counterparties. It's not like a bank wants to do business with a convicted felon, which is what these organizations are now.
Right. And again, though, just to temper our enthusiasm here, it is important to understand that, as you said, not only is what's his name, Alan Weisselberg, the only person who is going to prison, and I mean, he hasn't been sentenced, so I don't know. So we'll wait and see about that. But that the fine is the maximum penalty faced is $1.62 million, which might sound like a lot of money to you and me, but is a tiny. It's like $10 for us.
Right.
It's a rounding error, as the New York Times
right,
put it.
but it's still 1.6 more in criminal penalties to Donald's organizations that have ever been paid. This is a trial balloon, so to speak.
Right. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I think if we just look at that number and we look at Ellen Weisselberg in isolation, it can be it can dampen our spirits, but it is exactly what you said, a trial balloon, a successful prosecution in a criminal case. And I don't think it's an accident that Alvin Bragg, who I think made some serious missteps last year in deciding to start dragging his feet when they'd been making progress, he brought back in this new prosecutor whose name is, he's an ex-DOJ official.
His name is Matthew Colangelo.
That's right. And I went to school with somebody who had that last name, so I should remember that.
I mean, not only is he a former, federal prosecutor from the Justice Department, he'd also led the New York Attorney General's civil case looking into Trump. And so, hello, he wouldn't take that job if he didn't think he was going to do something with it. He's got all those facts that Tish James brought to bear. And now he's got the confidence of his boss, who's probably saying, let's fucking go. But of course, with due process. I'm sure he's saying it like that. I mean, there is.
Let's fucking go with due process.
Yes, that's kind of like. So good.
So let's, just to be clear, though, Matthew Colangelo, I mean, we don't know precisely what he's doing. I mean, the hope is that he'll pick up where the two prosecutors who ended up quitting left off. Right. But is there potential that he will also take some of the information from Tish James's civil cases and look into potentially charging them criminally?
I think he has to be looking at that, in that was, he had been leading the New York Attorney General's inquiry into Donald. That was what he was doing. So, right. And she said at the press conference, people were kind of like, well, what's going on? She said, why aren't you making a referral to the New York, to the Manhattan DA? And she's like, they know about this,
right. It's not a secret.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know what's going to go forward. I think, I'd like to savor our sweet victories along the way. This is the most significant legal victory against Donald since he started working for your grandfather and behaving badly and violating the law. This is the first time the law has caught up with him, and he might try to minimize it and say, well, big deal, it's only $1 million. Every dollar counts to that man. This is, I'm curious what's going on over on Truth Social right now.
Oh, we're going to find out. We are going to find out. And just, I do think that is very important to emphasize. This is the very first, which is terrifying on the one hand, but heartening on the other. It's some just.
Mary, it's the first. I think it's the first time any U.S. president has had a business criminally convicted. I mean, it's not, this is what really is so interesting to me is the press was not really following this case that much. And I was always sort of curious about that. And in some ways, it's kind of good because it just reinforces the fact that they are without a clue about how significant this was. I didn't see much coverage of the trial at all.
No,
I mean, there was coverage, but I mean, nothing compared to that lady's email server.
Nothing at all. So one thing, many things give me pause, but because, we've been not in this specific situation, but we've been in many situations in which we've said nothing like this has ever happened. No president, not that he was one, but you know what I'm saying? No guy in the Oval Office has ever stolen classified and top secret documents. That's got to be the fatal blow. Nobody at the head of the United States government has ever incited an armed insurrection against his own government. That's got to be the you know what I'm saying? So like the can keeps getting kicked down the road, and it remains to be seen. I can't tell you how many times I've thought, okay. And it's like being as a Democrat, we're always Charlie Brown trying to kick the flipping football. But this seems qualitatively different to you.
Just because I'm a lawyer, things like the word guilty mean something to me. This is not a charge. This is not an accusation. This is a final judgment. Things get appealed, but it's considered a final judgment. This is a guilty verdict. His corporations were found guilty by a jury of felonies in New York State, many of which in the complaint that were described, they talked about federal tax fraud too. So there's no reason why that the IRS wouldn't be also looking at criminal charges here, which they and also, as I mentioned, this the Southern District of New York should be busily working on the referral from September 21st, just as my students, the final exam in my white collar crime class is taking the referral, imagining you're working for the Southern District of New York, and recommend whether the pros and cons or the strengths and weaknesses of bringing charges under these particular bank fraud and making a false statement to a financial institution case. And my students have collectively researched the specific case law in the jurisdiction. I'm going to come up with several, I don't know how many students, what do I have? Like 40 of them, 40 different papers to look at. And they're all, some of them are going to be fantastic. All of them are going to be good, I'm sure. And as I was talking to Jill Winebanks and Victor Shee last night, and they said, maybe I should, send my own referral onto SDNY. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just take the papers, wrap them up with a bow. No, I don't think I'll do that. But, if my students can make prosecutorial recommendations based on the facts in the law laid out in the civil complaint, I don't see why there isn't a group of smart attorneys over doing the same thing right now.
Okay, so again, and this is shocking, gobsmacking, insane. This is the very first time in his entire criminal life that Donald J. Trump and his organization, which is synonymous with him,
even charged though, Mary, not even convicted, charged and convicted. So wait, it's 100% record, 100%.
Well, that's a better way of looking at it, isn't it?
100% of the time that Donald's corporations have been criminally charged, they have been convicted. And there's 2 corporations, 17 offenses. So anyway, so we can say 100%
conviction rate.
Yeah, conviction rate, 100%.
Actually, it's 1,000% batting average and 100% conviction rate.
Oh, now you're a sports fan? Is that?
I grew up watching the Mets at Chase Stadium, so yes.
I grew up watching the Lions, so
All right. Well, let's not bore everybody with our childhood memories of our respective
teams. Also Michigan football, which is much better.
I hate football. But anyway, so 2 quick questions.
Yes.
As you just mentioned, the Trump organization and related entities can now be considered a felonious enterprise.
Well, it's the Trump organization is just a doing business as. There's 2 businesses. I think it's the Trump Corporation, which is a New York corporation, and the Trump Payroll Corporation. Yes,
Right,
they
but
are felons, convicted felons.
okay. Now, does that hold true throughout the appeals process?
You don't get it's not yes, it does. In other words,
Okay.
this isn't like a civil case where you can get a stay.
Right.
People can sometimes, stay out of prison pending an appeal for the sentencing. It's not like that. This is a conviction that stands unless it's overturned on appeal.
So in other words, unless and until that happens, they're going to have a very difficult time getting loans. They're going to have a very difficult time explaining to the American people why it's totally cool to vote for somebody who is the CEO of a felonious entity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they should probably be voting for Alan Weisselberg because he outsmarted them all, is what their
Well,
argument is.
that's a very, and in the Republican Party, that's probably not a bad gambit. Okay, final question.
Oh, one thing, Mary. Remember
Mhm.
when your uncle was running for office and someone asked him if he paid his taxes and he says, "Not paying my taxes, that makes me
Makes me
smart." Guess what
smart.
it makes him today? Makes his company a felon. Doesn't it make you
Yay.
so smart?
Yeah, and as we also know from having seen certain of his tax returns, it makes him a terrible business person and
Mhm.
a shitty American.
Yes.
Final question. On
Mhm.
a scale of 1 to 10 ketchup bottles, how are things going down in Palm Beach this beautiful evening?
I hear shouting in my mind. I hear furniture being toppled over, things being kicked, and lots of screaming. Does that
Mm.
sound right to you?
Yeah, breaking of things.
Breaking of things.
Absolutely. And anybody who is masochistic enough to be with anywhere within earshot probably needs to
I would stay away from Taco Tuesday at the Trump
at the omelet bar.
or the omelet bar. Yes, right now.
Although, I mean, if you make the work easier for the omelet bar, just give him a bunch of eggs and he'll break them, throw them against the wall, and you won't have to go through the trouble of cracking them yourself.
If he
Yeah,
has the strength, if he's not in a fetal position somewhere.
Well, I'm telling you, I don't know if he hasn't already. Wait until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we are going to get some truths at us on Troth Central, as he likes to call his little social media puddle.
I hope Melania has packed her bags and gone somewhere else to stay the night if
What
she
makes
doesn't
you
already.
think she's there?
Yeah, no, I don't know. You've got such a good point.
All right. Well, Jen Taub, I so appreciate your insight because this is way outside of my wheelhouse. I'm just here to be skeptical and not be too hopeful, but you actually turned me around. I'm feeling much better. Again, I mean, it's a good thing no matter what happens, but you've given me some reason to believe that this is going to stick and have implications good for us down the road. So thank you again so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us for our this first of potentially two emergency sessions of the Mary Trump Show. Big news day, as they say. Thanks, guys, so much. And we may see you later. Ciao.